Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to MindShifters Radio with your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeanie. Michael and Jeanie share with you the wisdom of the ancient Aramaic internal process of forgiveness. They offer tools and support 5 days a week from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They will support you in building a solid foundation within yourself to live in pure love. In Aramaic, Rakhma. Michael is the author of Why Is This Happening to Me Again? For more information on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. And now your co-hosts, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce. And the truth that is rooted within me.
Welcome to MindShifters Radio. My name is Michael Ryce, and Jeanie is here with me, and let us see if there's anybody in the chat room or any questions, or is Dr. Tim with us this morning? Dr. Tim, how are you this morning, sir?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Awesome.
Had a wonderful group last night, 12 people.
Tell us about it.
Aramaic Beatitudes, comparing two different translations that have a very, very similar theme. And that theme is that the Beatitudes offer a set of practices for deepening a spiritual process, which strengthens the viable conscious spiritual body and leads to a better, healthier, happier life. So we got 12 people that were absolutely thrilled with the material and left buzzing.
And any particular breakthroughs or anything to share in that regard? I'd love to hear about what happens in support groups in terms of changes that occur.
We had two people give testimonials last night that weren't necessarily related to the Beatitudes, but one gentleman has been facing for a number of years struggles with his son, who had his first year of college this year. And prior to coming to the group, he described himself as a screamer. And he came in last night and wanted to share with the group that this summer his son has been home, and they've actually been able to work together on projects. And he relayed that the use of his tools, the Reality Management Worksheet and the MindShifter process, has put him in a place where he can start talking to his son, and when his son gets upset, he can just calmly and gently repeat that he loves his son, he's not trying to argue with him, he just wants them to be able to talk together. And he said in that process, he can actually watch his son's energy relax, and they've actually been able to work on projects together and communicate this summer, which has been a first since his son became a teenager.
Doesn't get much more rewarding than that, does it?
No. Absolutely fabulous.
You said there were two people who shared some major shifts and changes?
Well, there was another person who has been on a regular basis coming in and sharing different successes. And last night she mentioned that she was aware of one of the things we talked about yesterday on the show briefly was the Aramaic Beatitude that says, make your home in the breathing unity. And she had an insight when she was walking the other day because she knew this was coming up again. And she was walking and she had the insight that she always did breath work, but since beginning our work together in the MindShifters group, she's been introduced to the breath work, but she didn't understand this concept of the breathing unity or the connection. And she was out walking the other day, and she realized that when she's breathing out, the trees are breathing in. And when they're breathing out, she's breathing in. And the connection of the energy flow just... And as she said that in the room last night, people were tearing up. You could feel the connection that she had experienced. Those are the two that come to mind.
Well, it's interesting because to just expand on what you've shared in both cases from the point of view of the work, and for those who are maybe new to the work and what does all this mean, if you hold a newborn child, you get a direct experience of what human life is. And if you think about that human life as a power supply, we're designed to be plugged into it. And it is the breath. In the Greek language, we could say the holy breath, but the whole, that connected breathing, it's what plugs us into a proper power supply, And what passes for life for most people, the rage, the fear, the fighting, I love you, I want to marry you, and let's see if we can now destroy each other's lives kind of living, which is, just about typical in our culture. You look at the sarcasm in television shows and such, and it's like, yeah, well, okay, there go 2 more lives down the tube now that they're getting married. That when we're plugged into a mind of hostility, fear, rage, grief, pain, trauma, and drama, it seems like those are the only options. And breath is the key and a way to plug into something different. If we use a power supply that's not designed to run a human life, we don't end up with a human life. I use an example of, imagine we've got a toaster in your kitchen, and you're going on the road with a newborn child, with a young child, and you put the toaster in the motorhome, and you live in the motorhome for 10 years. So this child goes from the beginning to age 10, and you've got this toaster that you call a toaster that makes toast, and you plug it into the motorhome, which has a 12-volt power supply. And, of course, with 12 volts where there's a design for 110, you get this, kind of slightly warmed bread that you call toast. And so this child grows up and only knows that as toast. And so it proclaims that's what it is. And, of course, it's got nothing to do with toast. And it's the same if we live life, and our culture and our generational issues tend to be those of hostility, fear, and, of course, somebody else is always to blame. Hold the breath and start to talk sharply to someone else instead of owning what's going on for yourself. Am I disconnected from my power supply? What happens in a so-called life that's disconnected from its proper power supply is not life. And what most people are living isn't life. And we call it living. It isn't even alive because the active presence of love, a human life, isn't there. And so in our moments where we lock down the breath, we want to speak sharply to someone else and make it all their fault because we're in pain, that's where it's time for us to stop and plug back into the proper power supply, plug back into the supply that fuels a human life, and it is the active presence of love. And sadly, most people don't even have an experience of that in our culture. They don't even know what that means. It sounds like some kind of half-baked cockamamie story, but if people who live in that hostility and fear-based world only knew that they're designed to be experiencing 24/7, 365, the active presence of a human life, love, in every cell of their structure, would lives change? I mean, huge, huge changes. So that's what I hear you describing as you describe what's happening in the support group tonight. Certainly acknowledge you for the gift that you give to those folks who come to that support group every week and get to play with you.
It is indeed an honor, a joy. It leaves us buzzing. It remains one of the highlights of my week. So I would offer that kind of highlight is available for anybody who chooses to start up their own group, and I would once again offer phone and email support to anybody who has questions about that process. And thank you for having this internet show for that very support reason.
Well, it's certainly my honor and privilege. And, of course, there's that old saying that says we teach best that which we most need to learn. And here we are learning it. And when people join with each other on the path of learning it, it creates a field that accelerates the healing and the learning process. And that's what we're here to support people in doing. There's an interesting African proverb that I love to share with people. And it says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And there's kind of a story that I like to share that really illustrates that point on an energetic level in a place where, people say, well, that's just suggestion, that's just a placebo effect, et cetera. But if you jump on the website, Jeanie has created a link under media for a story about a lion named Christian the Lion. And this lion, it's an absolutely true video. These two guys are in England, and they get themselves a pet lion. And, of course, you can't keep a pet lion for too long in your apartment in England. And so these fellows finally, as the thing starts to grow, take it to a preserve in Africa. And they go to Africa a year later, and they go out into this preserve and call to this lion. And they go looking for it. I'll never forget the first time I watched the video, and you see this huge male lion just come bounding down a hill toward these guys. And, my thinking was, I sure hope this is the right lion. And what happens is this huge male lion comes charging down to these guys, jumps up on them, and it's almost like it's hugging them. It's got its paws. Its paws are as big as this guy's head. It's got its paws around its neck. It's licking on them. It's just, loving on them. It's awesome to watch. But what ties in with the work that we're talking about is that along with this male lion comes the lioness that it is mated with. Now, the lioness is the hunter. Normally in the wild, these two creatures would, they would shred these humans. And I suspect that this lion did not speak to his lioness mate before they bounded down the hill and say, by the way, these guys are my friends. They're okay. Don't eat them. I'm sure that conversation did not occur. However, in the video, you'll see it. These two guys are able to pet this lioness, a wild lioness that's had no contact with humanity. How does that happen? Well, I think we can, when we start to look from the physics point of view, and the Aramaic language that we're coming from is a physics language. It's not a theological language. It's about physics. It's about psychology. It's about genetics. And the fields that we carry. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. If this female lioness had met these two guys in this preserve, they'd have probably been mincemeat. But there's the influence of the male lion that obviously carries a field, not a conversation, but a field. And the field makes it safe for these two men to be in the presence of this lioness, the hunter. And to me, it's an awesome demonstration of the principle that when we come together in a space, we just finished a 9-day intensive, and the people that were here, we just had an awesome 9-day with with such major, major breakthroughs for everybody in the group. And to watch the effect of the field of one person who opens and is willing and moves through these issues, and the impact that has on the second person, and then that impact doubles to the third person, and as each one moves a step forward, everybody moves to another level of opening and a step forward. It's just, it's fabulous to be part of, it's fabulous to watch, and certainly a privilege to be part of. So that's what our whole process is about, is the healing of ourselves, each other, and the planet, and to bring into each human form the actual human life that's designed to be there. And that's what we're looking to do. And as we do, each one that manifests another level, that is, brings into their actual experience another level of their humanness, the active presence of love, opens the space for everybody else to do exactly the same. So it's an awesome process.
Well, another thing that happened last night, there were quite a few comments about the 2 blog posts from this week. And both of those blog posts on my blog were direct byproduct of working with the MindShifter group and this internet show. And one of the more helpful things was the tweaking you did when I had the blog post about needing to forego the protection afforded by judgment. And
right.
And you tweaked that by saying the perceived protection afforded by judgment,
right.
because there is no actual protection. It's simply
That's
locking
sure.
me into the same painful cycle. When I judge someone else, I lock myself into the same painful cycle of thought and bitterness. And that prompted a discussion, and a couple people commented about how at first they didn't understand what was meant by that phrase, and then as we described it, it led to opening up even more discussions and deeper understandings about how every time I get upset about something, it's an energy inside of me I'm holding on to that's causing my upset. It's not the event that just happened on the outside. The event that just happened on the outside, if I'm willing to look at it that way, is a gift that reveals to me something inside of me that needs to be exposed to love and healed. And that was another big part of the meeting last night.
Yeah, I just went down to have lunch. Jeanie is just it's her first time in the kitchen, and here at Heartland, and I shouldn't say the first time in the kitchen, but the first time handling the kitchen, which was not her favorite thing to do. And she's just been putting out this awesome food. I mean, it is as good as any food that's ever come out of the kitchen. What she's doing is fabulous. But as I went down to eat, and I sat down, I asked everybody, how's everybody doing? Oh, we're doing fine. I said, well, I hope that doesn't last too long, and we get the next level to come up. Because the idea of being in the space of an intensive, the idea of going to a support group, is not to go and sit and be comfortable, but rather to be stirred and be able to look at some of the loads that we carry and to be willing to move through them. And as you say, the benefit of having a support group and that suggestion that everyone, wherever you are, create yourself a community. Going through this process alone is not an easy thing to do. It is a challenge, but each person who moves a step deeper into the field of wholeness, into the field of the whole breath, lives in the whole breath. In the Aramaic, that beatitude that Tim was talking about also can be translated, those who live in the eternal forces. And one of the eternal forces from God is the breath. In Aramaic, it doesn't say, in the ancient scriptures, it doesn't say God sent out his spirit. It says the Creator sent out his breath. It's our direct connection, and it's what empowers us. And as each person connects a little deeper, a little deeper, a little deeper, they create a space. That story about Christian the lion. The lion is a space that makes it safe for the female to greet humans and do it gently. And as each person comes together in a space of that gentleness, of that connectedness, it makes it easier for every other person to do exactly the same. And so that's what we're here to support you in. That's what we're here to spread the understanding of how that process works. And Dr. Tim, I am just so honored and delighted that you are so committed to doing what you're doing, the people that you're working with, the commitment to keep that support group going. It's just fabulous. It's just nothing short of fabulous. I wish we could clone you in every city in the nation. That would be a gift.
Well, it's happening. We have two people that we're hoping to get starting support groups in Chicago by the end of the year. They've been contacting me and discussing it, acquiring some DVDs and discussing the format and where they would meet. So I thank you for the compliment, and I thank you for the leadership that's provided the spark for this to happen, because it is your commitment and Jeanie's commitment to travel so much and teach to so many that has planted the seed here in Crystal Lake, which has grown to what it's become.
Well, we are only committed to taking it to every mind, heart, being on the planet. And each person that decides to jump on the team and support and assist it in happening helps to take things to another level. So, well, thank you. Jeanie, do we have any? Oh, go ahead, Tim.
We have a question here from the chat room. Joe asked about a rejection worksheet. He says, I'm coming off my latest rejection worksheet. I'm reminded of my trigger of my learning issues as a child, not being able to remember my colors in kindergarten. My question is how the pain has changed to a reminder.
Well, I don't quite understand the question there. It sounds like more of a statement that instead of being in pain when that's resonated, it's just a little jiggle from carbon-based memory to remind him that there's work to do. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, that's kind of, I'm wrestling with it too. Maybe he'll type in something more. The question is how the pain has changed to a reminder.
Well, I know that for myself, situations that I would find myself in that yesterday might have been, upsetting, disturbing, shown me parts of my mind that held something that was painful. As I forgive, as I go inside, and by the way, the process of forgiveness is about going inside yourself and removing what never belonged. It's not about letting other people off the hook because that's in there. I mean, it's so ridiculous, the whole Greek interpretation of forgiveness. I have all this pain inside of me, and it's all your fault, but it's okay, I'll forgive you. There's nothing to change what's going on inside of me. By the way, we are on day... Jeanie, have you got the calendar there? Day 52 or 3?
It's day 59.
59. Time flies while you're having fun. So we're almost 60 days out from Memorial Day. That ties in with the comment that if you are willing, you think about the person who's in pain, and here comes a situation again where they've done some forgiveness work, and what happens instead of going into pain, which leads to conflict, which leads to strife, what does it become? A reminder. Oh, I remember when. And instead of something to fight over, it just becomes, a reminder that, okay, this is a place where I maybe have a little more work to do. And so that becomes really awesome, because what happens if instead of being in pain, going into conflict in a situation, I just have a reminder to hold the space of love? Did I just eradicate war from this particular relationship? That's exactly what happens with the work as people actually do it. And so our celebration of Memorial Day, on Memorial Day, we got to interview a couple of people around the whole idea of war, if you want to go back and listen to that, one vet, David, actually, who's the center manager here, said that once on a television interview when he was asked the greatest sacrifice that he made in going to war, that was that he agreed to kill people, and how horrendous a sacrifice that was. So our way of celebrating Memorial Day on a daily basis, and here's day 59 of celebration, is each day to invite you, whoever you are that's listening, to be willing to look at one issue, just one, even the smallest irritation or upset, and be willing to forgive that rather than speak or function out of that. And by so doing, we will form a critical mass of people who will remove the reasons for war from planet Earth. The reason for war on planet Earth is fear and hostility, and its corollary, greed. I want somebody else's property because I don't have enough for myself. Once we rid ourselves of the fear and hostility, what we'll find is that we are creators, and there's enough for everybody to have it all and don't need to take somebody else's. And guess what happens? War disappears from planet Earth at that point. And that's what we're looking to do, is to literally disappear war from planet Earth. If this is a new conversation for you and you're going, well, what do you mean forgive? What we invite you to do, you can go to our website free. The book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again, is on the website. And the book lays out the forgiveness process. It's actually a conversation with a character named Richard, who's this recalcitrant kind of guy who doesn't want to hear anything that I'm talking about. And he gets to deal with some of his relationship issues, some of the things that he's been holding on to for too long. And we walk him through the forgiveness process. If you want a short form, just go to the process itself. You can go to www.whyagain.com. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a link that says Download Worksheets. If you go to that link, you'll see the first three links relate to how forgiveness is done from the Aramaic language. The first link is a new copy of Chapter 24 from my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? The second link is the actual worksheet process. The third link is a radio show that we did back in February with a gal named Pamela Gregory, who was kind enough to work with us and actually have us guide her step-by-step through a worksheet. So if you go to the website, you will find the tools and the how-to. And it's actually a really simple process, not always easy to own what's going on inside of us, but such an awesome thing to do when we're willing.
Michael, we have a clarification from Joe. He said, after time passes, do we just forget painful issues? He says, removal, I can't seem to remove.
Well, if you listen to the man named Yeshua, he will tell you that you may do 77 times 70 worksheets around a given issue. As you diffuse the hostility and the fear that never belonged in your physiology, things begin to dissipate. They begin to fall away. And as they fall away, life becomes just a whole different game, a whole different process. But it is a process. It isn't an event. It does take time. And so the willingness to take the time becomes key in the process. Any other comment from him?
Well, someone else was just mentioning that they understand that welcoming self-honesty is the key, knowing that with it life can only get better and that pain gets less and less and less. So soon enough we never take notice of the pain, it becomes a way of life, and we see the blessing in disguise. but no further comments from Joe yet.
Cool. Yeah, it is a huge chunk of learning to see that the opportunity is in fact the blessing, and it is the chance to move through those issues. When we're brought up in a world that says, no, they're the enemy, and what I'm feeling is all their fault, and if only they'd change, and if only they'd be different, and if only they wouldn't do what I hate them doing. You know, one of the pseudo solutions we offer of what we call a non-being mind, or this hostility and fear-based self, is if I could just control everybody and everything, then I'd never have to face and deal with what's going on inside of me. And of course, if you could just control everybody and everything, then what would happen is you'd bury the state of imperfection, and on would go whatever's happening inside of you. You can't escape your own mind's content, your own genetic history content. You can delve right into it. If you come from generations of deniers, which is what most people in our culture have been taught to do, they've never been given the tools. They've heard about people who've done it. They've been told to worship people who've done it, but they've never been given the tools to do it themselves. And so what we're looking to do is to restore those tools and to give people the support in being able to use the tools of actual forgiveness, the tools with which to actually remove what never belonged in a human life in the first place. So it's a matter of changing long-standing, deeply ingrained, undesirable behaviors. Oftentimes those behaviors are generations in the making, and we inherited them genetically. And through that process of true forgiveness, which doesn't always come easily, you start to remove the content of those brain cells and start to see and hear differently what's going on in your world. It takes great learning to say, oh, this is mine, not they made me sad, they made me angry, they made me afraid. But to really, truly be able to own what you're feeling as yours, when your mind is lying to you, your mind will lie to you through its teeth. It will tell you, no, this is all there. They did it to me. I'm only feeling it because of them. Why did you talk to me like that? Why did you look at me like that? Great learning to say, when you looked at me like that, that brought something of mine up in me that I haven't wanted to deal with.
The other thing that comes to me, Michael, is that often when I do a series of worksheets and I'm not seeming to make much headway, my margin notes are important, because if I'm honest and I'm making notes in the margin about how I'm feeling in the moment when I work through the different steps, or how I feel in step 10 if it's something less than peace and calm, that is the seed for the next worksheet. And often what seems to be a sidebar on the initial worksheet turns out to be the real issue. So I might continually deal with worksheets on rejection simply because that's easier for me to deal with than an underlying issue that's hiding behind it.
Right.
So the willingness,
sure.
As you say, that cosmic grease, that willingness to keep exploring and that self-honesty. And I find the side notes on worksheets are often the key to the real release.
As we step out of the evidential mind, and you bring up a really important point there, Tim, and that is that this human mind is an evidential device. It only gives you the evidence that you've given your mind permission to show you. And so if you live in a world of I'm right, you're wrong, it's settled, why argue, you're the only reason I'm in upset, if you live in that world, then your mind will always build pictures and realities that back that up and make that appear to be true. You might remember a fellow named Yeshua 2,000 years ago said, don't judge by appearances. When we walk into the mind of appearances, if I live in I'm right, the only reality that can come forward for me, or maybe, the dynamic is one of, well, if I'm not right, I get punished. If I'm not perfect, I get beat up. Therefore, I always have to be right about everything. Then what happens is my mind can only generate realities that show me that I'm right, and that keeps me in the behaviors of error because I can't see my error. I can't see the truth of my behavior. But there's something that always belies the truth of my behavior. I'm in disturbance or upset. If I'm in disturbance or upset and I'm proclaiming I'm right and blaming somebody else, sharp conversations with somebody else, looks at someone else, what I'm doing to myself is I'm telling myself with that underlying disturbance and upset that I'm a liar, that my mind is lying to me, and that the thing that keeps me from seeing the truth about myself is the fact that I'm not able to face it. Because I'll get hurt, I'll get punished, I'll get beat up, I won't be acceptable, whatever the dynamic is. And so one perpetuates the very behavior that they abhor in themselves by hanging loose with that. If one moves into the state of, if I'm in pain, I've got something in me I need to deal with, here's my disturbance and upset. I'm in disturbance and upset. My mind is using corrupt data to build the world that I see. Therefore, I'm going to take a breath. Instead of being sharp and blaming somebody else, I'm going to own this is mine. Then I get to change what's mine. And all of a sudden, I'm not stuck in the cycle of the very behavior that I hate myself doing and that I judge myself for. And, it's like we're just human beings. Here we are. None of us needs to be perfect. We just need to start to be honest with ourselves and tell ourselves the truth and stop that projection of abuse and of the energy that creates war. To bring it back, to own it, and to move through it is an absolutely awesome skill. And, it just takes time to develop. And the thing that assists that most is each time I'm in disturbance to have a conversation about me instead of a conversation about you. One of the workshops we do, and we have a show, I guess it was probably a week or two ago, it was a show we did on communication. Did you hear what I think I said? The 7 steps of responsibility communication. Whenever somebody's in pain and their conversation's about somebody else, they're playing out of the game of projection. And by playing out of the game of projection, they get stuck in the old pattern. So when I change that pattern and own that I'm responsible for what's happening in my mind and in my life, then I get to change what's happening in my mind and in my life. Until then, I can't change it. And the person who can't change it, if you read the book with Richard in it, he's the character that's like, well, I'm always on the move. I always have, it's these women that are the problem, and so I'm just going to leave town, and then everything will be okay. And, kind of like the first gentleman that you spoke about, what would happen before he was able to stay in a space of connectedness and love with his son is probably leave the conversation. His son says something, he's all of a sudden, bang, it's a heavy conversation. Instead, what does he do? I'm love. That's right, I love my son. I have disturbance. I think I'll forgive my disturbance. I think I'll remove this. And what happens? The conflict with his son, the war with his son disappears. It's an awesome privilege to share this with everyone who's listening. And we would love to hear any questions that you have about the process. Our phone number, if you want to call in, is 646-200-4169. 646-200-4169. I don't know if anybody from the intensive is listening into the show, but if you are, we'd love to hear from you with anything you'd like to share about how the process is moving for you. Any questions in the chat room or anybody calling in, Jeanie?
Well, Joe was talking about having a sidebar that came up in a worksheet about fear of leaving the house, so we suggested breathing and some worksheets about the fear, and I also suggested a mind shifter for him. And Nene had typed in on the chat room saying that she was highly recommending the process from the intensive, and there was somebody else who chimed in and said something nice about your intensive work, and having an insight that the people's families should do the kind of work you're doing in your intensive, where you go farther together.
Yeah, for sure. We were sitting in class the other day, and in process, and everybody owning what was going on for them. And there was some pretty deep sharing, and the idea came forward: what if instead of going off to the Coliseum every Sunday afternoon, or turning the Coliseum on the television set and watching people, bully and push and fight and struggle over a piece of pigskin, what if people actually sat around in their family systems and dealt with the issues in their worlds and in their lives and the stresses and strains that they experience? How different might things be? And they would certainly be different. We could just get to the point where we're willing to do that. It would be awesome. Jeanie, any callers? Or Tim, any conversation in the chat room?
Well, just Joe thanking us for the support and suggested the mind shifter for him, that it's safe and healing for me to leave the house frequently with ease and comfort. And he liked that and thanks us for our support.
Cool. Fabulous. And that might be a good cue for us to explain the mind shifter process to anybody else who's listening to the show and perhaps not familiar with that. And a mind shifter is a tool that we use in this work, and it's a tool where you craft a thought that will resonate something limiting and give you the chance to work through that thought. So, for instance, using the mind shifter that Tim just suggested, if it's a challenge for somebody to leave the house, there's fear, there's panic attacks or whatever, then what one needs to do is process through the fear or the panic attack at its root. And, of course, you can't work through its root unless you can see its root. So the way that mind shifter works is you take a piece of paper, you draw a line down the middle of the page. On the left-hand side of the page, you write the mind shifter. And on the right-hand side of the page, you write everything that comes up in response to it. It takes advantage of the fact that the mind operates by a law called the law of resonance. And when you resonate dissociated content, sooner or later it has to come up to the surface because you keep adding energy to it. One of my favorite mind shifters, and this might be a good one to just throw out for the whole group because with our travels, the way that we see people suffering over money right now is just amazing. But so for someone who's having a challenge with money, the mind shifter that we offer is this one. I always earn twice as much as I can spend. Now, the average person, when you say that to them, says, "Are you nuts? What are you talking about? That's ridiculous." So that would be the first thing to go on the opposite side of the page. And then there may be a whole stream of thoughts that flow. It might be, what do you mean money's never been in abundance? I can't pay my bills. I've never been able to pay my bills. And so you might run out of things to write. So you write the mind shifter again on the left-hand side of the page. I always earn twice as much as I can spend. What comes up in response? And the idea is you write every physical sensation, every thought, every feeling that comes up. So it might be, I always earn twice as much as I can spend. That's a crazy idea. Right? Again, I always earn twice as much as I can spend. Gee, my stomach's hurting right now. I wonder what that's about. I always earn twice as much as I can spend. Well, my family system, we've never had enough money to pay our bills. I can remember being a kid and the last time, oh man, is my gut ever sore? Wow, what's going on here? The last time that I saw my father was after he and my mom had a big fight over money, and he left and never came back again. There's a core issue. And we can tell by the fact that there's so much pain in the stomach that that's where that issue was stored. You know, the mind, what we call the body's mind, functions through every cell in the structure. And so once you recognize that, you get a chance to start to change the content of your mind when you can look at the content of your mind. But if you're dissociated from it, you can't change it. You're going to be stuck with it. And so that's the idea of using a mind shifter. Jeanie, anything to add to that, or Tim?
Well, Jeanie wanted you to know that she doesn't have self-service.
Okay.
I would just add to what you were saying that the mind shifter takes advantage of the fact that there is this law of resonance that operates within our process that we're often calling thought when really it's simply resonance, as you discuss.
Right.
And the other piece is, another part you bring up is that the mind is an evidential device. So it's important to not ask questions for targeted journaling from this perspective. For instance, if I ask a question like, why do I have such lousy relationships? And I start journaling on that, what I'm likely to get is my mind telling me all of the reasons for why I have negative, bad, lousy relationships.
Right.
And there's not likely to be much insight in that. But if I make a statement and I keep it as a positive statement, that's going to, as you just said, challenge and add energy to any competing thought or belief in my unconscious. And if I keep doing that long enough, the energy added to it forces it to break through from the unconscious to the conscious. So it's important, if you're doing a mind shifter, to keep it a positive statement and make sure it's a statement, not a question. Those two things seem to make them even more effective as a targeted journaling process.
Right. Well, and, you know, the idea, the definition that I use of a mind shifter is that a mind shifter is the thought about an issue in your life around which you have negative thought, and it's the opportunity to surface, process, and release the negative thought. So you want to target the thought that will resonate, content you want to look at, and actually I've found on some occasions, though not all that often, Tim, that it won't necessarily be a positive statement. Certainly when you're doing the worksheet, you're looking at the goal, you want to make it a positive statement. But sometimes the mind shifter itself, you want to craft so it's just the right frequency, the right vibration to fire whatever file in the mind holds the dissociated content. And so it isn't necessarily a positive statement, but certainly it's targeted to what. And as you start creating mind shifters, you just people become really expert at crafting them to really work and show up what's hiding in the mind. And the whole idea of the mind shifter is to show what's hiding. And what happens is the whole file in the mind on any given topic then dumps out on the page, and you can start looking at, where are the places I need to forget? Where are the worksheets in this particular issue? What do I need to do to clean this one up? So that's where we want to go with that. Anything happening in the chat room, Tim?
Well, Joe was asking if there's a worksheet for the mind shifter, and I told him where to get it off the worksheet page. And
I'm actually working on, for some time I've been working on, and it'll certainly be a while before it comes out, but a book called Mind Shifters, Keys to the Unconscious. And in that book, we're going to have several, probably end up with about 200 pages of mind shifters. And Joe, the place where Tim just sent you, what we suggest you do, rather than looking down the list and picking a particular mind shifter, because oftentimes this body's mind is tricky and it will keep in avoidance. But the way that sheet is designed to be used, when you download it, you'll see that there are 3 sections, and each section has 13 mind shifters. So before you even download it, I just invite you, and it's always fun to watch how this works because people key into exactly the right mind shifter for their work at the moment. So I invite you to write down a number from 1 to 3. Anybody that might want to try this mind shifter process, write down a number from 1 to 3. First one that pops into your mind. And then write a second number from 1 to 13. First number that pops into your head from that grouping. And then go and download the worksheet, and so you'll see there are 3 sections with 13 mind shifters each. So if you wrote down 212, then you'd go to the second section on that page and mind shifter number 12, and that would be the one to work with. Again, that's a process that I've used with people for 25, going on 30 years, actually probably more than that. And what happens is people always, before they write the numbers down, I ask that they be guided to the right set of numbers. And it's actually, when we're doing an intensive, it's hilarious because it's usually after several days that we do this process. And, of course, everybody's kind of got to know everybody, knows what their issues are. And, at least, 3 or 4 people in the group, it'll be exactly what they were talking about an hour before. It just ties right into exactly the issue that one needs to work on. So, and the book, Mind Shifters, Keys to the Unconscious, will have several hundred pages that will be numbered in the same way so that people will just be able to pick numbers and go to the mind shifter that will support them, or randomly open the book and go to it.
Michael, one of those files I sent you a couple weeks ago about the potential for the Reality Management Worksheet folder binder.
Right.
Part of it had my written out explanation of what you were just saying. Pick the number, the reason for it, lining up the page. It has a diagram of that. I don't know if you ever got to that, but that's buried in that worksheet process or that worksheet binder file. The other thing that's happening here is someone is talking about how they were doing, maybe it's Nene, who was talking about how she's had so much energy moving through the process of the intensive, and she can feel the energy changing, and what stands out for her is how intense the movement of energy and the physical symptoms of elimination and detox are. She says, being so intense, I take it as a sign of truly changing our DNA. And then Joe is saying he picked his mind shifter already. My relationship with blank heals my guilt. And he's thankful.
All right. That would be a good one to do.
Yep.
And that probably ties right in with the whole issue of fear of leaving the house, or what's that issue, and it'll probably just key right in there and support you in removing what never belonged from your structure.
And then if it is Nene, she says, to anybody who has not experienced the cessation of feeling any need to react as I would have in the past, it is truly a miracle. So this is transcending, whoever that, I think it's Nene. Jeanie says Nene is Dancing Rose. So transcending is somebody else who's had this process and has found that the cessation of any need to react is truly a miracle.
For sure. It is. It's always just the most amazing thing to watch it happen.
And you've got about 4 minutes left.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Well, does anybody have any last-minute questions? And while you're thinking about that, if you type them in or if you call in, the call-in number is 200-4169. If you're ready to move your work to another level, you might want to think about intensive time. Right now we're just beginning or just moving into the 9-day teacher training. On August 5th, we'll start a 16-day Laws of Living. We have a schedule for a 9-day intuitive development to follow that. Right now, it's not moving forward for lack of registration. We're having one of the smallest summers we've had in 22 years here at Heartland. But it's one that could still move forward if enough folks showed an interest in it. So keep us posted if you're interested in doing an intensive. If you want to really upgrade your work and go to the next level, that's what the intensive process is about.
All right, and Joe just types in on the chat room that he loves working with you guys. So that's Joe Bryson.
Well, welcome, sir. We haven't seen Joe in a while. Joe and his sister actually came to Heartland several years ago. And, he's just moved to Reston, Virginia. And anybody who's in Reston, Joe has done support groups before. Joe's interested in creating a support group. So if you're in the Reston, Virginia area, tap in with Joe and see if that's something to join with him in doing, creating a support group in Reston. So delighted that you're on the show, Joe. It's a blessing to have you here. It looks like we're down to about 2 minutes. Anybody have any questions for this last 2 minutes or anywhere that you want to go?
Well, I don't see any questions. I would just wrap up from my comments with one of the people last night was asking, what does it mean to make your home in the breathing or your home in the breathing unity? And the best that we came up with last night was that I put the focus of my conscious attention on my breath and what I'm feeling physically and emotionally, as opposed to the logic, the thoughts, the trying to know, the trying to decide what to do next, to just slow down and be present with the energy of creation that is breathing me. And that source of love.
There's where I was going to go with it, Tim, is that there's an awesome place that happens in the still point process where you are breathed instead of breathing. And to me, that would be the home, that when the energy of the Creator in the universe breathes you and moves your physiology, your home is truly in those eternal forces. And as you live in that breath and those eternal forces, you will create the best year yet of your eternal life. And that's what we're here to support you doing. And we'll look forward to hearing from you tomorrow. Please bring a stranger with you tomorrow. Delight to share with you. Blessings.
Thank you for listening to MindShifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeanie, who present that internal Aramaic process of forgiveness. Michael and Jeanie are here every Monday through Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Earth Angels Radio. For more on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. That's www.whyagain.com.